a good parent during the 1980s and beyond was someone who knew about and controlled the whereabouts and behavior of their children 24/7. And and uh, they were seen as the creators of their kids. So to the extent that kids were successful in visible, culturally valued activities, they were defined as good parents. In other words, they had moral worth as parents. And the more their kids succeeded, the more moral worth they had. If their kids failed, that was a threat to their moral worth. And that changed the way parents looked at their kids' involvement in organized youth sports. It became important to parents.
You've said before, you've given an example of when you were a child in sports, and that progression I found to be very interesting, how it's gone from, are you lucky to have Jay as your child, to, how did you create Jay, the superstar?
Right. Yeah, and that kind of shows what happened between the 1950s and the 1990s. Basically, when I was playing Little League Baseball and some other organized sports, my parents never went to a game. But when I did well, uh, people found out about it, and they'd go to my parents and say, "You're really lucky to have Jay as your son." And especially on a little league team that was really successful in Chicago at the time. And uh, and then when I became a parent and my kids were playing mixed doubles in tennis and went down to Albuquerque from Colorado Springs to play in the finals for the regional, to go to Forest Hills. This was a big deal for them. They were 17 and 16 years old, and they drove our van down there. Nancy and I couldn't go, and they lost. But people would come up to us when they saw Dennis and Danielle play tennis, and they'd say, "You must really be proud of your kids." And I'd say, "Sure, we are." And then when Tiger Woods in 1997 won the Masters, people went up to Earl Woods and said, "How did you create a Tiger?"
Yeah.
So in 2 generations, parents went from being lucky to have a kid who was playing sports and having a good time, to being proud, to being the creator of child prodigies. And Richard Williams, they asked him the same thing. When Venus and Serena started to win, they came to Richard Williams and said, "How did you create these phenoms?" And in fact, Richard Williams was the first person in the USA Tennis Hall of Fame because he created Venus and Serena. So that recast parents from being an occasional spectator to maybe cheering their kids here and there and being proud of them, to actually creating.
Now, I know that I have felt the pressure that if you're not at every single game and contributing in some way, you obviously don't love your children. And
Right.
it's a very interesting dynamic.
You're not nurturing your children's sport dreams. And I there's a lot of kids whose sport dreams shouldn't be nurtured in the way that they're being nurtured. That they should be playing in a variety of different activities so that they just learn to love physical activities, because they're probably never going to get a scholarship, and they're certainly not going to make a national team or play a professional sport. But a lot of parents think that that's the goal, and that's going to make them look good. So they oftentimes push their kids in ways that kids shouldn't be pushed.
And even if you don't, if you don't push them directly, I know parents who talk so highly of their children and their achievements in a certain sport that they really feel the pressure anyway, even though it's not, you have to practice, or our whole world is revolving around this, you need to do well. I think the pressure still in subtle ways is felt and parents don't even realize it.
Right. Yeah, there's a real thin line between encouragement and support on the one hand, and pushing and pressure on the other. And in fact, there's a social psychologist at Utah State, Travis Dorsch, and he and his students have done research on youth sports. And, and one of the things they point out is that kids are less satisfied with their sport experiences the more money their parents spend on sport.
That
Because,
is a great
because they
quote right
feel
there.
they feel that pressure. And they're really in a tough spot, because on the one hand, they feel gratitude towards their parents
Mhm.
because their parents are doing all these things for them. But on the other hand, they start to feel pressure. And by the time they hit 13 years old or older, and are concerned with their own autonomy and developing new identities and everything else related to major developmental tasks, they feel trapped.
Yeah.
And that's when dropout occurs, burnout occurs, and a lot of kids injure out
Mhm.
because they're not into it the way they should be in order to play in ways where injuries are less likely to occur.
I'd like to share a personal story. As you know, my daughter was playing in Boston College, and I I didn't care whether she played soccer, I at all anywhere. She certainly was talented enough to play any sport she wanted to.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought I wasn't putting any pressure on her at all. And things like, and this never really occurred to me, but I went to Boston College. So we started by going to their ID camps and, just because it was something that I knew. And I think what happened was I was, my face would light up with memories of Boston College and playing tennis and, well, wasn't it great? And isn't it? And and while I tried very hard not to put pressure or say, you have to play in college or anything like that, or really, why don't you just have a real life instead? It's really not that pleasant playing D1 soccer, but I think she wanted me, to be proud of her. She saw me light up and associated that with going to Boston College. And so those types of things I think parents need to be a little more aware of because they're so not on our radar. And
Yeah.
kids, in my opinion, kids who've been playing elite sports have been exposed to things so they seem more mature in some ways. And so maybe you're not treating them like they are your little son or daughter who is looking up to you for approval and acceptance and all of that, but really are underdeveloped in other areas.
Right. And this happens in these so-called skills and excellence programs that are the high cost pay to play travel club programs where coaches and managers expect total commitments from families. But what happens, and this is the word they use, you're in a pipeline.
Oh yeah.
And that pipeline is supposed to take you where you want to go. But that pipeline is also something that precludes other kinds of experiences and the development of other identities. So even though a lot of people are paying attention to you, and your parents are being dedicated to your development and everything else, you end up in this pipeline where you are developmentally delayed unless somebody's paying special attention to this and giving you other opportunities to develop other experiences, relationships, and identities that are not connected with your sport.
Clubs have become kind of like factories. Get as many people in the doors as they can, push them through to make sure that we collect as much as we can. And the more you pay, the more you play,
Right.
which are
Yeah.
some things to
And
be considered,
yeah, so kids are playing 2 seasons a year. Then
or
they're in,
more.
or more. They're in camps during
Mhm.
vacation times, and then there's special tournaments on holidays and so on. And so the kids, even though they may be having a fun time with their teammates or whatever, they're really missing out on a lot of other things. And uh, and that can create some developmental problems when they hit 18 to 24 years old, and they have to go through some makeup development at that time.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments. And join in the conversation around this topic and more in the forum.